Good morning and welcome to the Sports Carnival, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. Now for the guy who doesn't have a bad temper, but rather a quick reaction to bullshit. Here's your host, Dave Kearney.
Yeah, what's up, man? It's not really a bad temper. It's called being Irish, isn't it? Isn't that just what we kind of do? We just have a quick reaction. What's up, dude? How you doing this morning in Eastern/Central Washington?
Things are good.
It's like
Clear,
45 degrees.
31 degrees. It's not bad.
It's going to be, I don't know, 45, 46 degrees today. It's already 25. It feels like a relative heat wave has struck the region, which is pretty good. I know we're not done with February, but shit, man, it feels like an actual talking point when you live in a place so close to Canada. So there we go.
Yeah, anytime that it's not below zero, I would imagine you're happy.
Yeah, we are. In February, if it's not below zero, you're like ecstatic. And it really does feel like a heat wave when you're going from like negative 30, negative 15 real feel temperatures into the 40s. It's balmy. So hopefully you guys and gals are off to a great start this morning, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios, coast to coast, powered by the Recovery Room, our friends at BetUS, Kyle Cable, One Trust Real Estate, Preferred Insurance, the O'Neill Law Firm, and Joe's Helping Hands Landscaping, keeping this sports carnival powered up and going. We've got a big show coming up today, Chad. Mike Schmidt, NSU Wolves head coach, will be joining us at about 8:30. We'll talk to Mike about all things concerning sports, maybe Aaron Rodgers. We've got an interesting sort of a conversation to have with Aaron Rodgers as a focus topic this morning. We've got LeBron James passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar last night, NBA's all-time leading scorer. And Chad, I like these open-ended conversations that really don't have a right answer because it really boils down to personal opinions, feelings, and how you weigh eras. Who is the NBA's greatest of all time? And this is a completely subjective conversation. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or you can take the field and just go other. Because I had this conversation yesterday afternoon when I was bartending down at the Recovery Room, and it's really interesting to see where people come from in different generations.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's still Kareem, but I could be convinced, or you could argue Michael and LeBron. I'm not really going to be able to push back that hard. I think it really is subjective. And it's really, I think it's two different questions, really. Who has had the best career and who is the best player in my opinion, are two different questions. Because if you're looking at who is the best player, well, that's really subjective because that's really to the eye test and what you think this person could do in this era or that era or against this person without any real data, right? Because you can't actually, you couldn't pit Michael Jordan against Dr. J in their primes because it's just not possible other than a simulation on a video game. So you can't really say who's greater. In fact, I've seen an interview with Michael saying you can't answer that question because it's not a fair question. And he brings up guys like Jerry West. He goes, Jerry West was a great player. No one ever mentions his name. So there's a lot of different names there. But, I mean, when you're looking at who's had the greatest career, I think at this point you got to put – I mean, you'd also have to put Bill Russell in that conversation. 11 championships, that's a record that will never be broken. So we go to the football side of it, like with Tom Brady, 7 Super Bowl wins as a quarterback is probably never, ever going to be beat. So I guess it depends on where you come from. But if we're talking about LeBron James specifically, Charles Barkley's talking about this. For him to come out of high school with as much hype as he did and to be able to actually deliver for as long as he has is unparalleled.
And I think that that's where we have to sort of view LeBron, right? Through the lens of that unparalleled nature of success with expectations being as high as they were as young as he was. So I know that Jason Breacher's checking in here and he's talking about the offense getting away with so much. When you look at what LeBron does and how he's done his thing, when you look at what Kareem did, Wilt did, Michael did, they all did it against different kinds of defenses. So again, that's a subjective argument as well, right? Like what Wilt Chamberlain got away with back in 1961 and 2 is different than what he'd be able to get away with now. So we don't know. Would 50 points go to 100 every single night? Not sure. Really hard to tell. The reason that we don't really put Bill Russell in that same conversation is kind of the reason that we don't put Bart Starr in the conversation for greatest of all time quarterbacks, right? Because he won multiple NFL championships and 2 Super Bowls, but it was in a league that had I don't know how many teams.
Right.
The same thing for the Boston Celtics. You win 11 championships against 8 teams one in which your team had all of the best players at the time, right? Like,
Well, yeah, it's still amazing though.
no, it is amazing, but I think that's why we don't put Bill Russell in that conversation, because we look at it as a day of antiquity. It doesn't even feel like a realish version of what today's NBA would look like.
Well, but the other metrics that we do utilize to determine these lists weren't applicable back then. Blocks were
That's
not
true.
counted back then.
That's
You
true.
know, there's certain defensive player of the year, as you've mentioned, he would have won every year. He would have the rebounding champion every year. He would have been the block champion every year. I mean, you start looking at those accolades, if those would have been from the very beginning till now, and it was equal, and then you could start counting all the hardware, it would be like, well, it's this guy, obviously. But I understand what you're saying. There wasn't as much competition. Obviously, now it's a world game. That's the other thing you have to factor into this. I mean, we're reaching into different countries. So, where's Dirk Nowitzki on this list, right? I'm not saying
Right.
that he's in the top, even in the top 10, but he's definitely in the top 15 probably. But you get some of these European players, you start adding all of that and realizing how big this league has gotten. It's literally, when we're talking about it's the best player, not just in the NBA, but in the world, literally. They've always said that, but it never was true. It's now true.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why this conversation is so damn interesting. And I love where Rob Dog was going with this, because he went straight to the recency. Giannis Antetokounmpo. And listen, the Lakers and the Bucks get to play on Thursday night in Los Angeles. I had this wrong the other night. Wrong the other morning. I said it was going to be in Milwaukee. No, it's going to be in Los Angeles. This is going to be a good game. And by the way, LeBron James passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a fantastic accomplishment. The Lakers still lost. They were 6.5-point favorites.
Well, yes.
The Lakers still lost to the Thunder. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves here with this whole LeBron is the best ever. He is absolutely a dominant player. But I want to continue the conversation. When we come back, Chad, we'll look at all four of the top leading scorers in NBA history. We'll see what kind of company LeBron James was in. There's a couple of possible GOATs on that list as well. I love the interaction we've got going on Facebook, on our Twitch account, and on YouTube as well. So stay tuned. Sports Carnival coming back in about 60.
What can I say? The Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi Street is not only my favorite bar in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin, it's my favorite restaurant in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin. Breakfast served 8 to noon, Saturday and Sundays, daily specials, incredible cocktails, and the best damn wait staff in the entire city. My buddy Matt knows how to treat you right, and that's why when you go to the Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi, you're always going to have a great time and a great meal with a great cocktail. So if you haven't been in a while, or perhaps you're just regular and you want to stop in again, make it a thing. I'm there every single week. How about you?
The Social Distancing Sport Association, or SDSA, presents guidelines to safer athletics. For example, when participating in basketball, remember the Harden rule. That's right, James Harden is a man ahead of his time. Number 1, when playing defense, that is if you choose to, keep 3 to 6 feet between you and your opponent. Never double team and always appear disengaged or aloof. On offense, be sure to isolate yourself from your teammates. Dribble the shot clock down, rarely pass, and finally take a 30 to 35-foot shot. This has been brought to you by Arm's Length Under Armour. Go ahead and play. Just stay at least an arm's length away.
Podcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. This is the Sports Carnival. Remember, don't regret doing things, regret getting caught.
Yes.
That's right. Here's your host, Dave Kearney.
Yeah, that's always been my motto. Don't ever worry about what you're doing. Just don't get caught. And if you're not getting caught, that means you're doing it right. And especially in America, we pride ourselves on being able to go through what we call loopholes. All right, if it is. It's working and it's worth it. If you're just kind of jumping aboard here this morning, having a fun conversation, take this morning's poll question on our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney, as well as the Facebook group page, Chad. Who is the greatest NBA player of all time? You've got LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or you can take the field other. Now, our buddy Bob Ibeck, former PR director of the Cubs, author of a great book called Caught in the Net, which was the inspiration of that movie Blue Chips, Chad, with Shaq and Nick Nolte and Anthony Hardaway, says this on our Facebook group page. I'm going on record. It was Wilt Chamberlain, followed by Michael Jordan. I saw both play up close. LeBron is a bit down the list. Jabbar probably number 3. Bob goes on to say most exciting, Jordan and Pistol Pete Maravich. That's interesting.
The Pete.
Yep. This from someone who covered the NBA for 9 seasons. Money time, Jordan and Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, right up there too. See, that's a really good take because this is
I can't disagree with any of that.
Right. And that's where this conversation becomes a little bit more nuanced, because you've got somebody who is sitting right now in his living room, I would imagine, in Huntley, Illinois, or perhaps his office. And he's interacting with us in a way that he has the opportunity to recall. And I believe Bob Ibeck actually played at least a pickup game with and against Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West. So he's actually been on the court with these guys. He played his college basketball chat at Maryland. So when you think about that, you get a perspective that does really span the generations. And this is why I wanted to put three choices and the field other, because you could make a case if you watch Larry Bird during his prime career years, right? This is something I talked about yesterday.
Magic.
At the recovery room. Magic Johnson, one of the greatest. I mean, we mentioned Oscar Robertson. What
Elgin
about
Baylor is a name that never
you.
gets mentioned.
Thank you. That's the next guy that I was going to on that list. There are some players that, because we don't have tape on them like we would now, because they didn't have highlight reels, because of just a number of reasons, it was so long ago, it's really hard to compartmentalize exactly how good they were. Now, the other thing is this. Some of these players didn't play the career spans that they do now. They just didn't have the money involved with sports like they do now. So we don't know what would have happened if some of these guys would have played 13, 15, 17 years as opposed to just 10. There's so many different factors. What would happen if you gave Wilt Chamberlain, Pistol Pete Maravich, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell the same kind of training, AAU circuits, all year round basketball? I mean, these guys were more complete, probably humans, than they were athletes at the time comparative to now. But it becomes really hard to say exactly how good any of those people could be. Bob Pettit, for Christ's sakes, how good might have Bob Pettit been if he had been given today's kinds of training? It's so hard to say, but I will go on record one more time. And this is where I'm going to vote this morning at the Sports Carney and our Facebook group page. I believe the greatest player of all time is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because he had the most signature and unstoppable offensive move. He was one of, if not the best defensive players in the league for a great amount of time. Still has the most MVPs. There's something about that sky hook and being 7'4". It makes you almost like the perfect basketball player. And I've heard people saying LeBron is the perfect basketball body. I don't know, man. I mean, I know he's just, he can really play multiple positions, but Kareem was a lot more skilled than people remembered. And I saw him play quite a bit. That sky hook was just devastating up until his 38th, 39th year, or, that's how old he was when he won MVP of the NBA Finals. He was just always so dominant. High school, college, pros, he dominated everything. He's like the best basketball player probably of all time, and in my opinion.
No, and I can't disagree with that either. And the other thing that I always give credit, because you mentioned longevity, to Kareem, is he had the longevity before everybody was ever thought about going 20 years in the NBA. And a lot of it had to do with his discipline as a martial artist. And I think obviously what he did off the court, he took care of himself. So that's another thing you have to add to that list, in my opinion, is he did something that nobody else was doing, and did it 20 years before all these other guys are doing it, with all of this, sports technology that has obviously helped them with training and eating and all the things that we know now that we didn't know when he was playing in the 70s and 80s. He was ahead of the curve on that as well. But when you go back to LeBron and people saying that he's the perfect player, I think that if you were to go into a lab and create a player, he might be the body type, the size, the skill set, all of those things. And then to give credit where credit is due with LeBron, and I'm not a LeBron fan, honestly. I think he's a ball hugger to the CCP, so I'm not a big fan of that. But it is what it is. He is also a student of the game. Yes. Right. He understands the history of the game. He understands the players that came before him. Like Kevin Durant, they study that. He's had a goal to be the greatest of all time. I think in his mind, he believes he's the greatest of all time as well. He should. And I think all of these guys that are on these lists believe that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be as good as they are. And again, I go back to think about how much pressure coming out of high school, and to be that good that quickly and sustain it for that long, and to go all of those different teams and really not to have a scandal off the court. If you couple all of that together, that's extremely impressive too. And again, it's subjective. It's everybody's opinion. And it's a fun conversation. I don't know if you can win this argument, but now that he is the leader in the league with the most points, I think more people are going to start jumping on that bandwagon of, yeah, LeBron is the greatest. And I don't know how you're going to really argue that.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point earlier when you said there could be a difference between greatest career and greatest player, right? There is that because, again, the greatest player is probably never going to be answered. I don't think we'll ever have a clear consensus. Like nobody will unanimously vote LeBron James greatest player of all time. But greatest career, Chad, I think that's a really, really good sort of a definition for LeBron James because let's face it, Michael Jordan, as great as he was, and I know that he's getting right now, let me check our Twitter feed. Michael Jordan, 33%, LeBron James, 44%. Okay, LeBron James is winning. Our Facebook group page, Michael Jordan running away with this thing, 59%. So Jordan dominated the league for like 7 years. There were 7 years where Jordan was absolutely dominating the league. Could have been 8, but he stepped away from the game, right? So the Bulls and Michael Jordan had that 8-year window of just absolute domination. LeBron James has been basically dominating the league since he came in, like you've mentioned 20 years ago. The fact that he went to 9 straight NBA finals, Chad, 9 straight. And I know he didn't win them all. He won 3, lost 6, but he went to 9 straight NBA finals and he did come home with hardware. It's not like he was the Buffalo Bills of the NBA, right? Like he didn't just keep going and never come home with anything. He went to 9, he won 3, he went to 1 with the Lakers, he won that one. So he's been to 10 NBA finals, but 9 of them consecutively. That's almost unfathomable in today's NBA, right? In Bill Russell's NBA, different story. But today's NBA, to think about how many times he had to reload, retool, go through teams that, honestly weren't all that talented outside of him, except for the Miami Heat. They had a really good roster with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. It really is kind of impressive. So the greatest career, I've got to give it to LeBron. He's going to end up going well over 40,000 points. He might move into second, maybe not second, but he could probably get into third place. Who knows? Maybe second all-time in assists, depending on how long he plays. He'll never pass John Stockton. He's going to have well over 10, 12,000 rebounds when he retires. It's going to be hard to debate that LeBron James didn't have the greatest carear. It really will. I mean, it really will. Greatest player? I don't know. But greatest career, that's an interesting one.
Well, again, I still have Kareem in both of those categories, but I can be swayed. And of course, not to take anything away from Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, as you said, literally dominated the league like no other player, other than maybe what Bob talked about, which is Wilt Chamberlain. And I think there's a comp there just because how dominating they were and having to change the rules of the game for some of these guys. That's the other thing that a lot of these guys are factored in here too. Shaq did the same thing where they were so dominant that they changed the game. Michael Jordan was in the same category. Kareem, they changed the game for him. Obviously on this picture right here, you've got Kobe Bryant, who's 4th on the list.
Yep.
There's another name that we haven't really brought up. And sometimes I think he gets a knock because his game was so similar to Michael Jordan. And if it wasn't for Michael Jordan, would Kobe be Kobe? But still, you have to take your hat off to his, not only his career, but let's not forget, probably went out better than anybody else ever. What did he end up with in his last game?
Points.
Think about that. At his age, the amount of basketball that he played to drop 60 and to walk off, that was impressive.
Yeah, that was the most, emotional I've ever been at the end of somebody's career because the Lakers had been horrible. Kobe had been in just an absolute tatters. They were managing his health the entire season, right? Like he didn't practice. It was a really, really hard watch for Kobe those last couple of seasons. That's why NBA fans, and I think that Kobe deserves to be in the conversation. I don't think he is the greatest of all time, but I think he's in the conversation because he gave every ounce of himself to the NBA. The other thing that I want to mention, and I know that this isn't, probably, being lost on many people. You look at the 4 leading scorers in NBA history. Are you noticing a trend with the jersey that they have?
Yeah, but that's not fair because other than Kobe, all of these guys came from somewhere else.
Okay.
And played a lot of their career, especially Karl Malone. He did all his damage in Utah. Give me a break.
I'm just saying that if you notice something, these guys all ended their careers with one team. It's the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think that when you go back through these, listen, when LeBron gets the ball last night from Kareem and Kareem hands him the ball, these are 2 Lakers. It's interesting. That's all I'm going to say.
You know why? I can tell you why. Because they're the Raiders of the NBA. They take all of the leftover greats at the end of their career and they put them on one team. I mean, remember the team that had, what was it? Karl Malone, Gary Payton,
Shaq,
who,
and Kobe
Shaq,
Bryant. They
Kobe,
went to the finals. They lost.
I know,
to the
but it was
Pistons.
like it was like all of these, past their prime dudes. I don't know. I find it interesting that Lakers always have to scrape the bottom of the barrel at the end.
They went
of
to the NBA Finals. If it wasn't for a Karl Malone injury, they beat the Pistons. Chad, come on. I mean, that's a pretty good run. If the Lakers, that would have been their fourth championship in 5 years, and they bring on Karl Malone, who had a very nice efficient season, averaged about 14 points and 8 rebounds, was perfect in that triangle offense. Gary Payton had a better first half of the season. Lindsey Hunter ended up picking up for
I'm
Gary
just
Payton.
saying that you can't,
man, that was a great team.
You can't credit the Lakers for all of this greatness is all I am saying, just because they're willing to take these guys at the end and they have to be wearing the jersey when they cross the, whatever marker they're looking to cross because they've spent the rest of their career somewhere else. Even Kareem didn't play his whole career in LA.
No, but he only played his first, I want to say, 5 seasons in Milwaukee, and then he played the last 15 of them in Los Angeles. So I think we give Kareem a couple of nods to LA. I like what Joe V is saying here, checking in. He said LA is like the NBA's assisted living. Hey, if you were going to be in assisted living, you don't want to be in probably any other place. If you had your choice, okay, and you had all the money in the world, let me tell you what, if you could live in Southern California, you would. And that's why everybody who has all the money in the world lives there.
So the other way to look at this argument is, we've talked about this before. If you were able to draft one of the greatest of all time, and let's say that they're in their window of peak performance, who would you draft? That's the other way to look at this. You could pick one, you could get them in their prime. Which guy would you pick?
Yeah, I'm still and this is
and my answer would be Kareem, because he's 7'4".
Yep.
You pick the tall guy.
Yep. That's the answer. That's the answer. And the other thing is, and this is where I went back and forth with this gentleman yesterday at the recovery room. This is the thing about basketball. You can't teach tall. And while I understand that LeBron James at 6'9" has the ability to do so many interesting and wonderful things, we can't forget that the impact that Kareem and guys like Kareem can have, especially when motivated and athletic on the defensive end of the ball, right? It's like, think about this. It's like having Brook Lopez times 1,000. Like, that's what having Kareem is like. And it's hard to even fathom how fucking good Kareem could be. Think about Brook Lopez. Think about this. Brook Lopez is a really good player. He's dominating NBA defenses, right? Like, he's a dominant NBA defender. Kareem was like 1,000 times better than Brook Lopez. Like 1,000. It's not even fucking close. So yeah, I'm taking Kareem because, again, you just don't know how these things are going to shake out. If LeBron James would have played in the 70s and 80s, he would never have reached the number of points that he's at right now. They just would have played it a different way. So there are things like that to look at too.
And Matt's saying that Kareem, it was Kareem 7'2".
They list him at 7'2". They listed Kareem at 7'2". Kareem was like a freak of nature. I've seen Kareem stand next to Shaq. They list Shaq at 7'1". Kareem's markedly taller than Shaq, even when he was older.
It's funny about heights, and you wouldn't think this, but I know that Bill Walton always wanted to be listed at 6'11".
Yes,
because he actually admitted this. He literally thought that when you said that somebody's 7 foot, they treated you like a freak, and he didn't really want to be treated like a freak. So technically, he was 7 foot, but they listed him at 6'11". So I don't really get hung up on some of these numbers because I think there's a lot of fudging going on. There always has been in all sports. Weights, heights, they go one way or the other. It just depends on the insecurities of the particular player. So, was he 7'2"? Was he 7'4"? It's at some point, it's like, is it 100 degrees or 102 degrees? Does it really matter? It's over 100 degrees. You're over 7 foot. Does it really an extra 2 inches?
And this is interesting because I wish we had a call in line. Bob Ibeck, I would have just call in and give us the exact height of Wilt Chamberlain as well. Wilt Chamberlain also went under his actual height because of the same reason. So when you look back, because there's actually quite a bit of tape of Wilt Chamberlain playing against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Both of these guys are 7'3", 7'4". Both of them. They were absolute giants, which, again, we look at things in a different way than we do now. And the way that they looked at things back then, I mean, shit, guys, there wasn't a big and tall store. That wasn't a thing. These Guys had custom-made beds, custom-made clothes.
That's
We
true.
weren't just walking around thinking like, hey, 7 foot's the new, the new normal. It's kind of like 40 points in the NBA is the new 30. Well, 7 foot, 7'2", 7'3", 4. I mean, it came with some interesting like circus type connotations, right? So there is that. Let me tell you, just back to our conversation, who we take, the irony of Bill Walton being seen as a freak.
Yeah, he's worried about being seen as a freak. As Hype not worried about the way he comes off when he's in an interview or wearing his tie-dye shirts. That is really funny.
I miss him. Throw it down, big man. Big man, throw it down. I miss that so much. Hey, speaking of guys who have bombastic voices and give us plenty of like catchphrases here on the Sports Carnival, Mike Schmidt, Northern State Wolves head coach, is going to be joining the program coming up here in just a couple of minutes. I actually see Mike is in his office. The background of Northern State is beautiful. It's cold. Let's take an early break here, Chad, because I want to get some takes from Mike on not only the upcoming Super Bowl, what we could be talking about with Aaron Rodgers in his Mystic 4-day retreat, which I think is actually very interesting, but also LeBron James, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, the whole GOAT debate in the NBA. We'll see where Mike is at on this one as well. Stay tuned. Sports Carnival broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios, powered by the Recovery Room. We'll be back in just a second.
Preferred Insurance is the official auto, home, business, flood, and life insurance agency of the Sports Carnival, serving folks in La Crosse and surrounding areas with licenses in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. As an independent insurance agency, Preferred Insurance is free to find the very best insurance for you, your family, or your business needs. Call my friends at Preferred Insurance today and set up a free consultation. Remember, working with an independent agency means Preferred Insurance works for you, with you, to find the best solutions at the best prices.
Back to the Sports Carnival broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. Remember, just because we don't care doesn't mean we don't understand. Now here's your host, Dave Kearney.
Yeah, it's kind of like when somebody says, "Oh, aren't you happy for them? They're getting married." You're like, happy for them? No, it doesn't really do anything for me. I'm happy they're happy, but I'm not happy for them. It's just, me being happy for their happiness. Welcome back. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Welcome back to the Sports Carnival. Great to have you aboard, especially if you are in the lovely states, or I should say territories we call the Dakotas, where we all understand they shouldn't be given two separate Senate representations, but that's a different conversation for a different day. Mike Schmidt joining the program here. Mike?
Dave, I'm on a retreat. I can't see you. We're blacked out here. We're only going to talk, only sensories. I'm feeling so many things right now, Dave. I'm feeling so many things now that my sensories are so enlightened.
Oh, Mike, it's so great to hear you. Maybe not see you. Oh, there you are again on the show. Oh boy, that's a heck of a way for us to just kind of jump right into our Aaron Rodgers.
There you go, Mike.
The man, the myth, the legend. Mike, you go on a 4-day silence retreat. Your wife tries desperately to text you. The children are running amok. Of course, you don't have that opportunity, but Aaron Rodgers does. Aaron does. Do you think that he'll be able to come up with a decision after these 4 days off? Because see, now you've brought us right into the heart of the Rodgers discussion.
I mean, Dave, if you can't come up with a decision 4 days in the dark and with whatever, then I don't know. My favorite part of the whole story yesterday with Pat McAfee is he's like, how many people are in there? Like, you can imagine how weird that would be if there was other people in there. Like, there's this group of people in this dark room. I mean, that would be the opposite of like enlightening and calming. That would be the most agitating experience of my life, to have all of these people in this room and I can't see them, and I'm so frustrated with all their stupid noises and mouth breathing and all of that would be just awful. But the one takeaway I had was like, man, like, how can you relate to the everyday guy when you're like this? Like, I just feel like there's nobody that can relate to what he's even talking about. And that's not because we're not smart enough. That's not because we're not enlightened like he is. It's because just feels like out of touch with the normal person, with the reality, which is so funny because he's made so much money on all of these commercials and these things throughout his career for kind of feeling like a normal guy, for kind of expressing putting on the persona and having the brand of being just kind of a normal, regular, fun, loose guy. And it's like, it's just this, like, it's like these crazy crypto frat boys that have pictures of Elon Musk and Rammstein all over their dorm rooms that think they're the smartest people that have ever walked the earth. That was touch. Like, I'm like, we've lost all touch with reality at this point.
So, Chad, you might have a different take on the 4-day darkness retreat than I do, and maybe Mike does. We've got to
look how comfortable he looks.
I know. It's a good sitting position. Let me tell you, I do that one quite a bit. I'm a yoga guy. I feel him.
Yeah, yoga's great.
What are your thoughts on a quarterback, and especially one like Mike said, who seems to be losing touch with the normal guy in a state, Wisconsin, where he plays his football, Chad, where the race to normalcy is almost everybody's goal as a child. I talked about this, Mike, with your brother-in-law, Jimmy the Haggerty, who has a hard time being normal. Like, he's just not a normal guy. But the race to normalcy that you sort of get to in Wisconsin, it can cripple people in some ways, right? Because they have these expectations. My question goes back to you. What is your thought on this particular move by him?
You talking to me or Mike?
Yeah, you.
Well, I mean, you got to remember he is from California, right?
Okay.
If he was with the Chargers right now, no one would really care about any of this. No one would really be talking. They'd be like, yeah, that's normal. He's going to go on his juice diet, go in his dark room, and everything's fine. But obviously, I understand you're in a sports world. This isn't necessarily something most sports guys talk about, right? And the fact that he's so open about it, I think his biggest mistake is going on the Pat McAfee show and being as open as he is, because it opens him up to all of this criticism. And a lot of these journeys that he's taking, I think, should be more personal. So then it makes me think, is he really doing it for that reason, or is he doing it for the attention? Because I have no problem with what the journey that he is saying that he's going on. In fact, I applaud it. I think it's great. Open yourself up, learn more about yourself, all of those things. There's more to life in football. But is he doing it for that reason, or is he doing it to get attention? That would be my question.
And so, fellas, this is where I'm landing on this right now. I feel like with COVID, Mike, and with how he handled that whole situation, really the last number of years since the Packers decided to, oh my God, draft a quarterback, Jordan Love, as a potential replacement for him, he's been really kind of a cultural opportunist. When he sees something that fits whatever direction, that he thinks that he can jump on to possibly elevate himself in a certain way, he's taking this opportunity. But it's not with any conviction, Chad. And this is what we were talking about, at least in my opinion. This is what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with this whole, the woke media is trying to get me and big pharma is trying to get me. Bro, you couldn't even have the sack enough to tell people that you just didn't get vaccinated and to go pound fucking sand. If that's what you wanted to tell them that, right? Kyrie Irving said that. Again, don't necessarily agree with his stance, but at least I've got to respect his position. He didn't do that. He jumped on something when he saw that there was now some sort of a groundswell for him to have a safe space in. This to me feels like a bunch of nonsense. It really does, Mike. And it feels like a cultural opportunist, and he's trying to seem so enlightened and seem so awake. And I don't know. I'm not buying it. I mean, I'm really not. And again, as a football fan, what the fuck do we care? How does this help you play better football?
I think that's the bottom line that I think he continues to miss in these interviews. Like that's why like you can't go on this media outlet and have just this opportunity, because people aren't really criticizing him or care about any of this stuff. Like, I couldn't care less about this, but like, you want a guy that's going to be the quarterback and win football games. Like, how will this help you win football games? And for me and for us, I think that's where he's really out of touch, is he feels like this woke mob is after him. And I'll be straight up. I'm totally against the woke mob or whatever that is. If you can point me to whatever the woke mob is, or the leader of the woke mob is, whatever, I'll figure that out. But I'm totally against like canceling guys and against like judging him for this stance and what he wants to do. I'm with you, Chad. Like, do this. If this is what you want to do, like, yes, let's go. Let's do that. But at the same time, like, We don't. I think he thinks people care so much about all of this stuff, but we don't. We don't care about that stuff. We care about wanting to win football games. And the part that doesn't match up is like this, like, cool, I'm in touch with my like feelings, bro, and this is awesome. And that's fine. But at the same time, then you can't kind of be aloof and be a jerk and put this outward persona of not being, very, I don't know, like you're complaining about stuff all the time and everybody's after you. It just can't go both ways with that thing, in my opinion, on what he's doing. And yeah, Big Pharma's out to get him. He had the Pfizer's talk last week, and these people are brought to you by Pfizer. Shut up. Like, what are you even talking about? Where are we at right now? How about how you're going to attack cover one with the wide receivers that you have? That's all we really care about. We don't care about your personal life. Just figure out how to win football games and get to the Super Bowl.
No doubt, man. So you guys been seeing the new betting odds? I'm not sure if you have. If you go to betus.com or if you go to DraftKings or you go to any of these platforms, the new betting odds have Aaron Rodgers going to the Raiders as minus 390. Minus 390. For what that's worth, and for those that are completely uninitiated with betting, you'd have to bet $390 to win $100, which says the sharp money is all on Aaron Rodgers going to Vegas now. The Packers are at like plus 300 at this particular point. Now, I will say something else. I heard from an inside source recently who asked me not to reveal, so I can't, but it's somebody that I know that works inside and around the Packers. There is belief that Aaron Rodgers is already gone. This thing's a done deal, that he's out. So that might make sense to why we're seeing this new number come out, the Raiders minus 390. And listen, I think for what it's worth, it makes sense because Vegas does have Devontae Adams. They're going to have the opportunity and the ability to pay him probably what he's getting now. They shouldn't have any cap problems. Derek Carr's gone. They owe him nothing. That might make sense, but it's surprising to me to see that now we have gone completely away from Green Bay. Like, this thing with Green Bay now feels like it's just, there is no chance for it to come back. Mike, do you kind of feel that same way, that at this point now, especially with what he's doing, his 4-day retreat in the dark, that this thing's over with?
It sounds like that. I mean, it sure seems like this thing's over with, and it seems like we're moved on, which I'm shocked. I'm truly shocked by that. I mean, I knew he would always come back because there's way too much money there for him. Like, when he's in the darkness, he's going to be thinking about $60 million, $60 million, guaranteed 150 over the next 3 years. Like, that's all that's going to be going through his head, is how much money he has and what he can continue to do with that money. That's way too much money to leave on the table. I think for the Packers at this point now, you look at it and it's like, the more you look at it and analyze from the Packers side of this thing, look at the Buccaneers and what they're going through right now. They are having to get an entirely new offensive staff. They're having to go through a lot of changes there. They don't have a quarterback whatsoever to even speak of at this point, and trying to figure out what they're going to do as an organization. And the Packers, while they have Jordan Love, they can also turn Jordan Love, if you look at the Raiders, into a top 7. I think they're at 6 or 7 in the draft. They can turn Jordan Love at quarterback and Aaron Rodgers still into the 7th pick this year, and certainly more draft capital next year to help Jordan Love, which makes him a lot better player. So looks like they're positioned to make this move and move on from the Packers side of it. I can't believe we're at this point, to be honest with you, and where it's at, but it sure looks like the Packers are the ones that are looking to be moving on, which is really hard to even believe at this point.
Well, Chad, for your information, last year, Mike, when we were doing the old radio show, he went right out on a limb and said guaranteed Rodgers isn't coming back to the Packers. He did. And so, Mike, we had to eat a little crow, because I was with you. I'd sort of gotten onto that particular train where I was thinking, man, he's out of Green Bay. It felt like, though, it was a matter of time, fellas. It really did. And Chad, you're a 49er fan. I can't remember exactly what the feeling was around the Niners, but when Steve Young started to come in and play in the place of Joe Montana, when Montana was getting hurt, he was awesome. Do you remember it feeling like the team was ready to move on right before they traded him to Kansas City?
Yeah, and it really sucked. That really pissed me off. I mean, I understand why they made that move, and if I was in the same position, I probably would have made the same move. But being a 49er fan, and specifically a Joe Montana fan, as a fan, it's hard. It's hard to move on when you really are invested into a player. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Green Bay fans that are really invested into Aaron Rodgers. And when they think of Green Bay, they think of Aaron Rodgers. Like, there's a lot of fans that when they think of Green Bay, they think of Brett Favre. And when that transition is made, that's hard to see that guy, especially when they played that long and done that well, in a different uniform. But it looks like that's what's going to happen. I watched that interview yesterday, and it almost sounded like he wasn't going to come back to football. But I think that once he goes into his cave, into his bat cave there in the darkness, he will come back out. And like Mike said, he's going to be thinking about money. And Vegas is not that far away from California, not that far away from Sedona. He can go buy some crystals and sit on a mountain. So actually, it could be a perfect marriage for him.
Yeah, it could be. I guess, guys, my next thought is this. Like, does Aaron Rodgers really think that particular move, outside of just the obviousness, Mike, of getting $60 million is going to win him anything substantial? And if he does believe that, I guess it's like every coach that thinks they can win and turn around a franchise, right? You have to have that belief. But if he does think that, I believe that he will be rudely awakened to the fact that the AFC is a much different conference right now than the NFC. That said, Mike, let's flex you into the Super Bowl conversation while we've still got you. Really appreciate you joining us as always on Wednesdays. This matchup between Philly and the Chiefs is one of the most evenly, at least on paper, one of the most evenly contrived matchups in Super Bowl history. I mean, these teams have the same overall record, scored the same points, same number of all-pros. I mean, there's so many ways that you can look at this and say it's a coin flip. Now that we're getting closer to game time, where are you at with this one?
I've been on the Chiefs thing this whole season. I think last year, even Dave, when you and me were talking a lot, the Chiefs started off really slow. They had the entirely new offensive line. It didn't look very good. They were, I think, at 1.2-5 maybe in 21, and it was just really clunky and didn't look good. But you're like, this thing's going to change and shift and go to the other side, and Mahomes will get this figured out. I as much as I love Philadelphia and both lines of scrimmage, they better hope they have a way to do whatever the Buccaneers did to Mahomes a couple years ago and just have free runners all over the place. And maybe that's the way that the Eagles win it. I'm all in on Patrick Mahomes right now and believe in what he's got cooking and got shaken. I felt like the Eagles were that team that was maybe a year away from being great this whole time, and felt like it was maybe the 49ers time. And then, that whatever happened with the 49ers with their quarterback situation and really getting dominated up front by Philly, dominated on both sides of the line up front. But I really think that this is I love Philly. I love what they're doing, but I think this is Mahomes' time and really look forward to him winning the game. Like flat out, Patrick Mahomes is going to pull out a Patrick Mahomes, and he is the X factor to me. As much as I love Jalen Hurts and I love the Eagles and what they have, Mahomes is the X factor, and I think he makes up that, what is it, 1.5 or whatever that the Eagles have been getting on this thing and been favorites. I think that Mahomes makes that up and finds a way to win the game at the end.
Yeah, Chad, this is something that you and I have kind of kicked around, the special magic that Patrick Mahomes has and how he's able to sort of be that guy in these moments. That's the thing that's making this prediction for me so terribly difficult. Tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, I'll be on with ESPN 105.5, John Papadopoulos. I'll be making my final prediction. And I'll tell you guys, it's a real toss-up for me because I look at this and I see all of the different ways that you could just split it right down the middle and see the game going any direction based upon the numbers. But then you look at the intangibles, and Patrick Mahomes, he really does. He scares me, and he might get into the conversation when it comes to greatest of all time in the NFL. He's not there yet, but he may get into that conversation. Now, Mike, final take here from you if we've got another minute and a half. Now that LeBron's passed Kareem, and we've been talking about it this morning, it's the subject of our poll question. There should become a legitimate debate, and there will be. There already was. Who the greatest of all time is, LeBron, Michael, Kareem, or just take the field and say other. Where are you at with this? Does LeBron going over Kareem, does that change any of the way that you feel about the greatest of all time, at least in your estimation, in the league?
It hasn't changed my mind on that part of it. To me, there's different buckets here. We have unicorns: Wilt, Kareem, Giannis, Shaq. They're unicorns. We always kind of thought they existed. They're kind of out there. We really hoped they existed and want to see this horse with a horn on its head and fly. And we're like, but that's not really real. And then all of a sudden, Wilt, Kareem, Shaq, Giannis show up on your TV screen or in the arena near you. And it's something that you've never seen before. And that is such a different kind of thing that you can't quantify it. You can't even put a number on what those guys really were. Then you have this other bucket of guys who have just flat out changed the game. Michael Jordan changed the game, got more people involved in the game, got more eyes on the game, changed what the game was. Not the NBA necessarily, certainly the NBA, but the overall game of basketball changed with Michael Jordan. Steph Curry is in that bucket, changed the game of basketball. It is a completely different game than what it was 10, 15 years ago because of Steph Curry, period. Not because of the Warriors, other things, because of Steph Curry, period. And then there's LeBron James, who is this, he's kind of in his, it's Kobe, LeBron, these guys that are these truly great, maybe the best of all time basketball players. I think that LeBron probably is the best of all time, but he hasn't affected the game. He's not a unicorn in that sense. Yeah, he's this guy that has this amazing power and he's 6'9", but he's not a unicorn in that sense of what those other guys were. So I just think I love LeBron's story. In a time where you had the Kwame Browns and the guys who were not making it out of high school to the point that they had to put in a rule to change the game and make them go to a year of college and come back because there's so many failure rates for a guy that had all these expectations and has lived up to every single one of them. I just appreciate that. My favorite is Michael Jordan. I think as much as I want to hold a lot of things against LeBron because I don't like the fact that he had to leave. I don't like the fact that these super teams, I don't like what that's done to the NBA. And now the NBA is tilted back the other way. But there was a 5, 6, 7 year period where there was literally 10 to 12 teams in the NBA that were awful, could not even compete because everybody was trying to create a super team or create 3 guys. And then, you look at the Warriors and then the Bucks do it with Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, who I know like the people in Wisconsin, we love them, but nobody else knows who those guys are. So LeBron is probably the greatest because he's lived up to every single expectation. He's not necessarily my favorite, but man, I mean, passing this thing doesn't necessarily change my mind, but certainly cements him probably as the greatest of all time.
Yeah, this debate, it's going to continue to rage. And the longer that LeBron plays, guys, and we know this to be true, the longer that he plays and the more of these records that he puts out of reach seemingly or becomes, it climbs more and more up these lists with assists, with steals, with rebounds, it's going to be kind of hard to deny that he at least had the greatest career, which is something, Mike, that Chad was talking about earlier. Take this morning's poll question. Go to our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney. If you're a member of the Facebook group page, weigh in on this and give us your thoughts. Right now, we've got Michael Jordan running away with it on our Facebook group page. And now Michael Jordan has edged out LeBron James on our Twitter feed as well. So I think the sentiment about changing the game is still there. And I think Michael is still a sentimental favorite. There's too many of us in this generation that still remember Michael. And I think for Bob Ibeck and guys that saw Wilt Chamberlain play, it might wash the same on them. Schmitty, appreciate you as always. It's great having you on. It looks cold, but it looks sunny. We're having a relative heat wave here in your home state of Wisconsin. It's going to be 45. We're getting in the pools today. Everybody's going to be on the river, breaking some ice. It's going to be a great time.
Same here, my friend. Appreciate you guys. See ya.
Okay, bye.
Now more than ever, if you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps an investment property, you need a full-time dedicated real estate agent who is up to date on all the latest trends and analysis and is ready to give you the kind of service that you deserve. That's why the official real estate agent and the official real estate partner of the Sports Carnival is Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate. Whether you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps you are a seasoned investor, call the official real estate agent partner of the Sports Carnival, Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate.
Hi, I'm Irene, and I care about you. That's why I started Care Packages by Irene, or CPBI. At CPBI, we have a wide range of care packages, from I care about you but don't get too clingy, to I'm completely obsessed with you and you should probably get a restraining order, and everything in between. Because it's CPBI, if you care, we care.
Visit us online at carepackagesbyirene.org.
And back to the action live from the Trauma Center studios. This is the Sports Carnival. I try not to laugh at my own jokes, but I'll be honest with you, Dave. It's hard. It's hard not to. Here's your host, Dave Carney.
Yeah, well, I've always felt it hard not to laugh at your jokes too, Chad. If we had another 40 years under our belts, I would say you give that stand-up comedy thing a shot. I don't think you're ever going to make it back up there. Do you have any desires to get back on the stage and try that once again?
To do stand-up?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
That was one of those moments where you thought, the sky would open up and you'd hear this, oh, like this is when
Singing.
it didn't
Yes.
happen. Did not happen. It's a lot harder to do than people think it is.
Oh,
And
Christ, yes.
I have so much respect for anybody that can do it, even if they can't do it well. The fact that you just get up there and do it, it's very, very difficult. It's one thing to do something like this when you're able to bounce off somebody, but when you're by yourself and you're up there on the stage and you've got 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200, 300 people or whatever staring at you, waiting for you to entertain them.
Yes.
Yes. And you may not have the same train of thought as they do or the same sense of humor. It'd be very difficult. Now, I did get some laughs, but it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And to be honest with you, that takes a lot. There's a lot of work. You got to be on the road a lot. You got to repeat yourself. That's the thing that I really don't like, is to really do it well. You got to hone that, and you have to say the same joke 900 times in 900 different ways till you find it exactly right. And I just don't think that I have what it takes to do that.
Well, that's an honest admission. It's one of these dreams that a lot of people have, and then you actually get into the throes of it, and you're like, oh shit, that's really hard. And it takes a lot of real talent. And that's why those guys are making it. And also probably why comedians are so depressive, right? Because think about what you mentioned. Like, that's a really depressive lifestyle. You're on the road. You're probably having to take a lot of chooch just to keep yourself awake and going. And then you're,
chooch.
You got to take these. You're saying these jokes fucking 900 times. Yeah, that's not always.
Did you say chooch? Is that what is chooch? Is that like a slang for?
That's a slang term for the toot fairy coming to see you. Yeah.
Okay.
I was watching this show on Showtime last night, George and Tammy. It's about George Jones and Tammy Wynette. Interesting, fascinating. So, anyways, George Jones and a guy that liked himself some chooch, as it turns out. So,
I did not know that George Jones was in the.
Oh yeah,
really?
Oh yeah. George was a wild man. I did not realize exactly how fucking crazy George Jones was, because he's one of my favorite all-time country singers. I mean, Randy Travis wouldn't exist if it weren't for George Jones. I mean, that's at least my takeaway.
Which I would have been grateful for.
No, stop it. Randy
Travis is creepy.
Well, okay. So he married like kind of his stepmom or something.
That's creepy. Okay. She's like 35 years older than him. It's a weird situation.
It seemed odd at the time.
And he looks like a guy that drives a van with no windows. And
now he doesn't drive at all. Remember, because he can't. Oh gosh, that's sad. Now, see, I feel like defending Randy, but I can't anymore because I'm going to run out of ways to defend him. So I'll just tell you this: like Randy said to many people, "I'm going to love you forever and ever, Chad."
Yeah,
that Kentucky accent. All right, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, because we've got our GOAT poll going up on our Twitter feed, our Facebook account. Facebook group page, I should say. Who's the greatest of all time in the NBA? I want to change gears because we talked about stand-up comedy. So this was completely off topic, but I was just watching some recent Comedy Central, Netflix stand-up specials. Some are good, some are okay, some are just downright not funny. It's really hard to break through in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different spaces in today's comedy. To me, the best current touring comics are like Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, not in any particular order, and I would struggle to find my third. Maybe I don't know. I'd say that those are probably my top two, and everybody else comes in a distant third. In all-time terms, what's your all-time list? Who's your favorite all-time comic, and in what order do you kind of have these guys?
I would have to say probably George Carlin, Richard Pryor. It used to be. It used to be Bill Cosby. Actually, I was a huge Bill Cosby fan. When I first got introduced to Bill Cosby, my dad had these records, and I remember listening to him over and over and over again. And I just loved the way that he was able to spin a yarn, if you will, because he wasn't really a joke teller. He was a storyteller. And it was absolutely amazing how he could captivate an audience for 2 hours and never repeat himself. And he's just he was the old school. I mean, when he won the Mark Twain Award, he was closer to Mark Twain than anybody that's ever won that award. George Carlin has won that award as well. I think Richard Pryor won it. So he used to be on my list, and for obvious reasons, he's not really on my list anymore. But those are probably my top three, I would say. Probably George Carlin, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, I would say, are probably on my list. But as far as new comedians, I agree with you. I really like Dave Chappelle. I like Bill Burr. A guy that doesn't really get a lot of credit, I think, is an amazing comedian. His name is a guy named Brian Regan. If you've never heard of him, he's great.
I feel like I have. Yeah.
Yeah. He's very animated. Doesn't use a lot of blue humor. It doesn't really swear a lot, but he's really, really funny, kind of goofy. He's a guy that's been around forever. As a matter of fact, he's one of those comedians. A lot of other comedians really like his work and how he's able to do what he does on the stage. And so, but not necessarily one of those big household names, which doesn't necessarily mean you're great, by the way, just because you're a household name.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But as far as, I mean, really, when you think about innovative and edgy and really what comedy's all about, I would say Bill Burr and Dave Chappelle are both pushing that envelope. They're willing to go on, like Dave Chappelle, willing to go on Saturday Night Live and talk about some of the things that he talked about, go against the woke culture and all of that kind of stuff, and at least push back a little bit and not apologize for it. I have so much respect for him, and he does it in a way that really brings everybody together to be able to laugh, except for the most woke, which aren't going to laugh at anything, and they have no sense of humor, and that's part of their problem. But to me, and then of course the Chappelle show was just absolutely amazing. The guy's ahead of his time.
Yeah, it was. He was so dynamic. I mean, just so incredibly dynamic. Okay, so my list, it sort of changes every other year or two, except for the top two. So I've got George Carlin as my number one favorite all-time comedian. I mean, George Carlin, I could watch, I could read, I could listen to right now with the same aplomb as I did when he was first coming out. I do have Dave Chappelle coming in at number two. Everything else sort of becomes subjective. I used to have Chris Rock at number three. I had
Rock's great too. Yeah,
Rock was fantastic. Eddie Murphy, obviously. Richard Pryor, loved him. But also, when I really think about his impact, not only on stand-up, but on the television screen, I think of Gary Shandling as one of my all-time favorite comedians Gary as well, because Gary was so good. And the Larry Sanders Show, to me, was it was basically the pre-runner of everything that we see in today's television. The Larry Sanders Show set the stage for going single camera, going around with these guys in a documentary style way. Like The Office doesn't exist in any form or fashion without Larry Sanders. Like, so many of these shows that we see now just don't happen if that show doesn't go on HBO. And he also, Gary Shandling, broke the fourth wall with the Gary Shandling Show, which hadn't really been done except for in the 1950s when George Burns was actually starring in a show and did that same thing, broke through the fourth wall. Some of the older comedians, because the style of their jokes were mainly one-liners, I don't really go there with them. But that's where a guy like George Carlin, you want to talk about goats and longevity, transition from old style,
hippy dippy weatherman to
and then had a medium style, and then had his late career, right? His late career was possibly his best portion of his comedic career. So that's why I've got George Carlin as the GOAT, and Dave Chappelle for a lot of the reasons that you've mentioned, and his innate storytelling ability. I've got him right there at number two. Everybody else kind of falls into a shuffle for me.
A guy I kind of forgot about and died right outside of Vegas was Sam Kinison, another guy that I really, really liked and have always admired, and was a guy that pushed the envelope as well. Obviously, towards the end of his career, he was a little too much Tudorutsky, as we know, and unfortunately ended up in a car wreck. Ironically, I think killed by a drunk driver. I say ironically because I think that he spent most of his life taking those kinds of risks, and luckily didn't kill anybody else or himself, but then ends up dying in a car crash. I think right outside of Laughlin. I think headed to Laughlin or coming back from Laughlin. I can't remember which.
Yeah, it was somewhere on it was somewhere on the highway in between Vegas and fucking nowhere. That's for sure. It's a depressing way to go. It's like Elvis shitting himself to death on the toilet. I mean, it's sad. It's sad.
Sad but true.
Right? It's sad but true. That's kind of the way that these guys go out sometimes, and it isn't great.
Like Mama Cass choking on a ham sandwich.
Yeah, right. I do want to shoot down Thomas here. Preacher Lawson or Mike Winfield? No, they're not on the list. Dennis Leary, he was a great stand-up comic for a while. I thought that Dennis Miller was great. Rest in peace to Norm Macdonald. He was a really good stand-up.
Oh, well, Norm Macdonald's one of my personal favorites, actually. Yeah, I forgot about Norm. Yeah.
He's fantastic as well. When you think about the guys that came through Saturday Night Live and just that sort of branch, and in Living Color, too, Jim Carrey was never really a stand-up comic. And if he was, I didn't see.
He was,
but it was a briefer time period.
Yeah.
Stand-up comedians, Marlon Wayans, Keenan Ivory Wayans, these guys, Damon Wayans, they were actually really
Harlan
good.
Williams is a guy I like, another Canadian. You mentioned Canadians of Jim Carrey. Harlan Williams is another guy I like.
And what about Bill Hader, right? We've got him and he's a pretty good comedian. And who's the guy that you like too that died?
Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks.
Yeah, Bill Hicks, where Dennis Leary stole most of his material. So if you like Dennis Leary, you should like Bill Hicks, because that's where he got all his info.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe maybe somebody that should get mentioned more because he was kind of a transitional period crossover would be Lenny Bruce. I mean,
Yeah.
Lenny Bruce was one of the first real bad boys of comedy. I mean, he
Yeah.
got in trouble for saying all sorts of things that today we would just go, no problem.
Right.
Louis C.K. got canceled, right? Like we
He
canceled.
did.
CK?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
Yeah.
Fun talk this morning, guys and gals. Thanks so much for participating. Thanks again to our great friends, BetUS. Go on to betus.com. Use the promo code Carnival. Get yourself some free money. Super Bowl coming up. Tomorrow I'll be on John Papadopoulos, ESPN 105.5. Kyle Cable, One Trust Real Estate, doing a great job for everybody out there, selling homes, getting them listed. And, of course, Tony, Preferred Insurance. Looking forward to seeing you later today, my friend. Chad, until tomorrow morning, namaste, and go get some dark rest if you can.